In every company, there are two types of people: those who make the most noise, always in the spotlight, shaking hands, giving presentations, making grand promises, and then, there are the quiet ones. The ones who work behind the scenes, who don't seek attention but whose presence is the foundation on which everything runs. Henry was one of those people. If you asked most employees what made the company successful, they'd talk about the leadership, the marketing strategies, the high-profile deals. But if you asked the ones who actually worked in the trenches, the engineers, the scientists, the technicians, they'd tell you the real story. They'd tell you about Henry. Henry wasn't flashy. He wasn't the kind of guy who walked into a room and demanded attention. He had no interest in corporate politics, networking events, or making a name for himself. But what he did have, what made him invaluable, was knowledge. Not just book knowledge, not just the kind you get from reading reports and crunching numbers. No, Henry had real knowledge, the kind that only comes from decades of hands-on experience. He understood the company's machinery, its processes, its inner workings better than anyone. When a problem arose, Henry didn't panic, didn't overcomplicate things with unnecessary meetings or bureaucratic nonsense. He simply found the problem and fixed it. And that's why everyone respected him. New hires would come in, eager, ambitious, full of fresh ideas, and they'd quickly realize something: if you wanted to get things done, you went to Henry. Not to the department heads, not to the corporate leadership, but to the man who actually knew what he was doing. He had a way of explaining things in a way that made sense, cutting through the noise and giving people exactly what they needed to know. And if something was wrong, Henry already had a solution before most people even realized there was a problem. But despite all this, despite being the backbone of the company's operations, Henry never asked for recognition. He didn't care about titles, bonuses, or prestige. He just wanted to do his job, to keep things running smoothly. And for years, under the leadership of the old CEO, that's exactly what he did. Until everything changed. The golden age of the company. The company wasn't always perfect, but it was once a place where people wanted to work. There was a time when employees felt valued, when innovation wasn't just a buzzword thrown around in corporate meetings, it was the driving force behind everything. It wasn't the biggest company in the industry, but what it lacked in size, it made up for in talent. And a lot of that had to do with the leadership. The old CEO, Richard, wasn't the kind of man who sat in a boardroom all day, detached from the real work. He walked the halls, he talked to employees, and most importantly, he listened. He knew that the best ideas didn't always come from the top. He understood that the company's success depended not on him, but on the people who actually made things happen. And that's why he trusted Henry. Whenever a major decision needed to be made, whether it was upgrading equipment, changing production methods, or streamlining processes, Richard didn't just consult the executives. He consulted Henry. Because he knew that Henry knew. He understood the intricate, delicate balance that kept everything running. He knew which shortcuts would lead to disaster and which investments were worth making. And because of that, the company flourished. Employees were happy. Productivity was high. There was a sense of camaraderie, a shared vision. People felt secure not just in their jobs, but in the knowledge that they were part of something bigger, something meaningful. But as it often happens, good things don't last forever. Richard was getting older. He had built something great, but he knew that at some point, he would have to step down. And so, after years of leading the company with integrity, he made the decision to retire. He believed he was leaving the company in good hands. He thought he was passing the torch to someone who would continue what he started. He couldn't have been more wrong. A new boss with a new vision, and a blind spot. Victoria was nothing like Richard. Where he was experienced, she was ambitious. Where he was patient, she was impulsive. Where he led with wisdom, she led with ego. She came from a corporate background, armed with an MBA, a polished resume, and an obsession with efficiency and modernization. She talked about change, about shaking things up, about taking the company into the future. And at first, people were willing to give her a chance. But it didn't take long for them to realize Victoria wasn't here to build on what Richard had created. She was here to tear it down. She saw the company as outdated, inefficient, bloated with unnecessary personnel. She didn't understand that a company isn't just a collection of numbers on a spreadsheet, it's a living, breathing entity made up of people. People who knew things, who had spent years mastering their craft. But Victoria didn't see value in that. She didn't see value in experience. And the person she underestimated the most? Henry. To her, Henry wasn't an asset, he was dead weight. She didn't see a seasoned expert with decades of experience. She saw an old man, a relic of the past, someone who was in the way of her vision for a sleek, modern company. And so, she made up her mind, Henry had to go. The clash of cultures. At first, her changes were subtle. She started restructuring departments, implementing new policies, introducing flashy new software that looked impressive but made things unnecessarily complicated. Meetings became more frequent but less productive. Reports piled up. Processes that once worked seamlessly were bogged down by red tape. Henry saw the warning signs. He tried to warn people. But no one was listening. People felt the change, but they were too afraid to speak up. They watched as good employees were laid off, replaced by younger, cheaper workers with fancy degrees but little real-world experience. They watched as productivity plummeted, as simple tasks that once took minutes now took hours. And Henry? He was ignored. He wasn't invited to meetings anymore. His suggestions were dismissed. Decisions were made without consulting him, even though he was the only one who truly understood how things worked. And then came the moment that changed everything. The subtle disrespect. Victoria didn't fire Henry right away. No, at first, she humiliated him. She questioned him in front of others, making snide comments about his old-fashioned ways. She rolled her eyes when he spoke, sighed impatiently when he tried to explain things. She undermined him at every opportunity, slowly chipping away at his authority, making him feel like an outsider in the company he had dedicated his life to. One day, during a company-wide meeting, she made a joke loud enough for everyone to hear. "You know, we really need to start modernizing around here. We can't keep relying on dinosaurs to run things." Laughter. Nervous, uncomfortable, but laughter nonetheless. Henry didn't say a word. He just nodded, stood up, and walked out. And just like that, the clock started ticking. Victoria thought she had won. She had no idea what was coming.